Hey guys, it's Casey and welcome to a tutorial on how we can make widgets that have kind of data tables inside of them, if that's how you want to think about it. We're going to have rows and columns of data. Say if you want to do like a server list, or you wanted to do like an inventory list or like a hero list maybe, that's what we're going to do in this video. So what I want to do is I want to create a new widget, and I'm going to call this widget, I'm just going to call it something vague like my column widget. This is just going to be like the overall widget that has kind of the parent data. So what I want to do is I want to make a horizontal box, and that this is going to be kind of the header or the top of our data. And I'm just going to add, let's say, like 4 text boxes to this. So I'm going to drag it in, and then I'm going to set this text to fill. In this bottom left, I'm just going to copy paste this text like 4 times. Maybe make it a little bit bigger, and then let's just make sure that these are all set to fill. If you set your text to be fill, that makes them all share this space evenly. So with these 4 text boxes set to fill, you can see they each evenly share the space. And that with each of these text boxes, I want to make them variables, and I'm just going to call them what they are. Or actually, let's change the text first. Let's make it be like level, and we'll call the next one, let's say, like our power, and let's do like our agility, and let's say like max HP or something like that. Just vague things that we can order. Now we can make this our level text. So what now I'm going to do is I'm going to go back through each of these text boxes after setting their text, and on the top right I want to make them variables, and I want to name them so that I know what they are. So with my power 1, I want to make it a variable, and I'm going to call this my power text. And I'm going to go to agility, make it a variable, and call it agility text. And this is just so that we can manipulate these later and that we can work with them. And this is going to be our HP text. There we go. And now all 4 of them are variables, and that looks okay to me. And now what I want to do is I want to be able to add data underneath this. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to, what I know I want is I want a scroll box underneath this, right? I want to be able to scroll down and have like the data scroll. But I know not only do I want to be able to scroll through my data, I want this top information, like the header information, I want it to stay there. So I'm going to wrap the horizontal box in a vertical box, and now if I drag this vertical box down, what I want to do is then I want to add a scroll box underneath our horizontal box inside of this vertical box. So if I do that, I take our scroll box and I just add it to the vertical box. So you can see we have our vertical box, and it has two children, which is the horizontal box and the scroll box. Now with the scroll box selected, I'm going to set it to fill. And now you can see here that our scroll box is now perfectly underneath our header information, so that once we start adding information to this box, we can add 1,000 pieces of information to this, like 1,000 rows, and that we can scroll through our rows of information and our header information stays here. That's like the hierarchy of this of the boxes here. So what I want to do is I want to make the scroll box a variable, and that's good for me. And now what we're going to do is we are going to make a new widget, and our new widget is going to encapsulate the rows, and that's how this works. We don't simply just start adding text inside of this. We don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to make a new widget, and that we are going to be adding widgets inside of this widget, and that's how we do our rows. So before I go over and make our row widget, I want to select this horizontal box, and I'm just going to hit Control-C, or you can right-click and do copy. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over, make a new widget, and I'm going to just call this my row widget. And now inside of the row widget, I want to delete the canvas panel. That's kind of important, pretty important. And with this canvas panel deleted, I'm just going to copy paste, or at least just paste in that information that I copied. And you can see here it is absolutely massive, but that's okay. With the canvas deleted, what this does is this should auto resize to the space that we are going to be adding it to. So that should work just fine for me. So what we have here is we have our 4 pieces of information, and now what I want to do is inside of the graph, I want to make 4 variables that match our text boxes here. So I'm going to make a new variable, and I'm going to call this agility. I'm going to make it an integer because I want it to be whole numbers. And then the second important thing I want to do is I want to make it instance editable and expose on spawn. Each of our variables, we want to make sure we instance editable and expose on spawn, and I'll show you why in a second. I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to do my max HP. I'm going to duplicate that again and do our level, and duplicate it one last time and do our power. So now we have 4 variables that match our text boxes. And on event construct, I'm just going to drag off. I'm going to hold control while dragging our text boxes. What that does is it makes it so that it automatically is a get. And with my 4 text boxes, or references to our text boxes dragged out, agility, HP, level, and tower, what I want to do on each of them is I want to set text. To make this a little faster, I'm just going to copy paste down and connect them to the targets. Then let's connect the execution pins between all of them. That looks good to me. And now what we want to do is we want to drag in our variables. So there's our agility, there's our HP, there's our level, there is our power. And now we just need to connect our integers to our text just in the bottom there, and that should automatically do a conversion for us. That looks good to me. Drag that a little bit to the right, and there we go. All right, so now on event construct of our row widget, whatever these variables are set to, our text boxes here, our level, power, agility, and max HP, will be set to the values that we have stored inside these variables. That is good for me. So now what we want to do is over in our column widget, we want to make our data. We want to add our data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomize my data personally. For you, you're probably not going to be randomizing data. You want to use whatever arrays of data you already have made, and you want to get out of them and add them to widgets. For me, I know that I just want to randomize some data. So I'm going to do a for loop because I want to add a certain amount of widgets. Let's add 20 widgets. So I'm going to do 0 to 19, which should give me 20 loops. And on each of these loops, what I want to do is I want to create a widget. And what widget do I want to create? Well, I want to create our row widget. And you can see when I select the row widget, it gives us some variables here. Our agility, our max HP, level, and power. That's why we expose them on spawn, is now we can set these values. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to randomize this data. So I'm just going to go on each of them, and I'm going to do random integer in range. Agility, let's just do like 1 to 15. I'm just going to copy paste it. Max HP, let's make it like 50 to 150. I'm just making up data here. I would not worry about it too much. Let's do level is like 1 to 15, or let's do like 1 to 20. Let's make it something different. Power, once again, I'm just going to make it something random. Let's do like 50 to 76, sure. This just makes it so that all the values, or most of the values, should be randomized and different between all of the widgets. So now, what I did with the randomization, you don't want to do. You want to make it so that whatever stored data you have in your game, that's what you're plugging in here. And now with each of these rows, I don't want to add this to the viewport. That would be the mistake. What I want to do is I want to add these widgets into our scroll box here. So what I want to do is I want to grab our scroll box, and I want to do add child. And then with add child, what we do is we just hook up the return values. So now when we create these row widgets, we're just going to be adding them to our scroll box. So let's see how that looks. There's one more thing I need to do, and I just need to, inside of the level blueprint on begin play, I just need to create that column widget and add it to our viewport. Create widget. I'm going to do that for my column widget, and I'm going to add it to the viewport. So now at the start of the game, we are creating our column widget and adding it to the viewport. And inside of our column widget, when it constructs, it's going to loop 20 times, 0 then 18, and it's going to create 20 row widgets and add it to our scroll box. And that with this randomized data, when we create each of these rows of information, it's going to be setting their data inside of their text boxes from the variables. So let's try that out. On play, you can see we get our box of information. You can see we have our header, and we have all of our randomized data, and I can scroll through it. Awesome. So that's the simplistic part of this, of just making data and adding it. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you how can we add some functionality to this scroll box. So what I'm going to do now is, let's say, for example, when I clicked on one of these rows of information, let's say I wanted to do some functionality. Let's make it so we can at least click. So what I want to do is I want to wrap our horizontal box here. I want to wrap it with a button. That's going to mess up our data a little bit. What I want to do with the horizontal box selected is I want to do this right side of horizontal align fill. That'll make it go back to the extents. And inside of the button, I want to take inside of the button, inside of its appearance here, its background color, I just want to set the alpha to 0, and that will get rid of that horrible gray background there. And now what we have is we have a button hidden underneath our text. So with the button selected on the bottom right on the events, I can do an add click. And let's say when we click one of these rows, we just want to remove it. So we can just do remove from parent. And what that will do is it will delete the array or the row from just our view. So if we play this again, if I click, like, say, level 20 here, power 54, if I click it, it deletes. And I can do this with any of them. And that's how you can kind of add functionality for each of these individual rows. If I just keep clicking all of them, you can see I can delete all of them until there's none left. You probably don't want to be deleting your data out of your rows, but this is how you add the functionality, though, is you add a button to that row. Let's say we wanted to communicate from our button back to our parent. Well, I believe what we can do is we can do get parent, and that this should return a widget reference of the parent of this row, and that should return our column widget. So what we can do is we can cast this to our column widget. Cast column. Why is that not returning? Okay, maybe we can't do that. Casts. Okay, so is that not a widget reference? Oh, that's a panel width. Let's try parent one more time. Okay, so that actually doesn't work. I thought I've used that before. Maybe I'm missing something. But one thing we can do, if we can't get parent, it's a little weird that we can't get parent, but if we can't get our parent, what we can do is we can just store our parent. So what I can do instead is I can create a variable here, and I can, with this new variable, call this our parent column widget, and I can change the variable type to be a column widget and an object reference. And that with that now stored, I will make it instance editable and expose on spawn. I'll save and compile, and now over in the column widget, I just want to refresh the creation of our row widget. So I'm just going to set it to none, and I'm going to set it back to be a row widget. And you can see here we get our new parent column widget, and that we can reference self, because that's what we are. We are a column widget, and I can hook that up. So now when we create a row widget, we are telling it who the parent is, and we are storing that reference. So now if we wanted to, inside of this column widget, we could make some custom events or functions. We could add a custom event called selected data or something like that. Or we could add another custom event, and we could call it like manipulate data. Manipulate data. And that what we could do now is that if we went back inside of our row widget, on click, instead of removing this row inside of the row widget, when we click it, instead of removing it from the parent, we could call those functions. We could take this column, this parent reference that we have now, and we can call that like selected data, or we could call the, what did I call it, manipulate data, and then we could call these events. So that makes it so that if we wanted to click on the data individually, we can then send, hey, we want to do something back to our parent, and we could just work with this data in whatever way we wanted to. Maybe it was joining a server. That's how you would do it. Like if this was a server list and you made it so that this was your server information in a row, if they clicked on that server inside of that row, you would connect to the server. That's how you would do it, is you would do it just like this, and that you could communicate back to your column widget if you wanted to. There's one more thing that I want to go through. Let's say we wanted to reorganize our data. So if I hit play again, you can see this is totally, there's no reason to this order, right? It's just kind of randomized. Like our level is not in order. Let's say we wanted to then, after we created this, let's say afterwards we wanted to reorganize this from greatest to least in any of these columns. So that's what we're going to set up now. Unfortunately, when you're working with scroll boxes or vertical boxes, there is not an easy, straightforward way to reorganize data. It would be awesome if I could say, hey, that data that's in the 5th row, I want to move you to the 1st row. There's no easy way to do that. What we actually have to do is we actually have to manually write how to do that, and that what we need to do is we need to clear all of our row widgets from that scroll box, reorganize our data, and that we need to add our data back into that scroll box in the order that we want it to be. So that's a little bit annoying. So that's what we're going to do now. So let's go through this, and what we're going to do is we're going to add buttons underneath each of these text boxes, or at least underneath all of our header boxes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap each of them with buttons. I'm not going to change their styles. We're just going to leave their styles to be that really ugly gray. That is fine with me. I'm just wrapping all of them with buttons. And now with each of them, I'm going to rename them and call it level button, power button, agility button, and finally our max HP button. And now with each of these, I just want to grab their on-clicked events. If we want to, on the left side here, with these variables here, I can grab like my power button, and in here I can do the on-clicked. So I have my max HP, I have my power, I can grab my agility and do on-clicked, and then last is our level on-clicked. That looks good to me. And that what I want to do now is I want to make a function for reordering our data. So I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call it reorder, or let's call it reorder rows. So now inside of this, what I want to do is I want to actually make this reusable. I want this to be able to do all 4 of our pieces of information. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to feed an input, and I'm going to make this an integer, and I'm going to call this, I'm just going to call it data to reorder. Yeah, let's call it that, data to reorder. And what I'm going to do with this index is I'm going to actually select out some data. But before I do that, what I want to do is I need to store all of our widgets inside of an array. The reason being is that we need to actually clear, like I said a second ago, to reorder our data, we need to clear all of our rows out of the scroll box and re-add them back in. If I clear them, I have no way of getting them back, right? Like, we need to have them stored. We need to have a reference to these widgets stored to be able to use them later. So what I want to do is off of the row widget of our creation on the return value, I want to promote to variable, and I'm going to name this variable our rows, let's call it our array of rows. That sounds fine to me. Array of rows. And that what I actually want to do is I want to delete this set just for a moment because I want to turn this into an array. So I'm going to click on this right icon right here and select array, and that changes it. So now when we get it out, we can do add. And now with add, we are just adding a piece of information to our array. And what do I want to add? Well, I just want to add this array value. So now when we loop through and we create our 20 widgets, we are going to add those 20 created widgets. We're going to add a reference to them to this array of rows. So now we have a reference to them. So what I want to do is, I'm just going to move that to the side. With all 4 of these button clicks, what I want to do is I want to reuse this function. So when I drag in this function, I add this integer. So what I simply want to do is actually what we can do is we can just copy paste it like 4 times if we wanted to. And I just need to remember what order these are in. So what I want to do is my max HP, I'm going to make it, let's actually make it the order that they're in here. So it's going to be level, power, agility, max HP. So I'm just going to reorder these to be, what I say, level, power, yeah. So it's going to be levels on top, power is second, agility, then max HP. And now what I just want to do is I want to make the top one 0, the next one 1, the next one 2, and the last one to be 3. And now what I can do inside of this function here is I can now, off of this, is I now know which piece of data we want to reorder based on the number I put in here. It's just a little clever trick here. So if we're doing 0, we're doing our level. If we're doing 1, we're doing power. If we're doing 2, agility, 3, max HP, and so on. So inside of this, what I want to do is I want to get out our array of data, and I want to loop through each of them. I want to grab each of them, and what I want to do is I want to grab out what piece of information we want. So I want to either get the level, so we can get out the level from that row. We can get out the power from that widget. We can get out the max HP from that widget, and lastly, we can get out the level agility. That's the last one missing. We can get agility. The order that we had them in was power, level, power, agility, then max HP. And now what I can do is I want to store this into an array. I want to store one of these values into an array. So with a local variable, I want to add a local variable, and I want to call this data to reorder. Oops, why could I do that? We've already had a variable named that? Oh, because the function is named that. Let's call this integer, int to reorder. Let's do that. Int to reorder, and I want to change the variable type to be an integer, and it's already an array for me. If it's not, make it an array yourself. And now what I want to do is I want to add to this one of these 4 integers. Well, which of these 4 integers do I want? Well, we know which one we want based on this input data that we have here. So what I want to do is I want to do a select. If I type select, we want to do this bottom one, this one with this fork here, and you can see we get options. I want it to be 4 options, so if I do it 2 more times, you can see we get 4 option pins. And the order that I had them in before is the order that I want to hook them up in. So you can remember here, the level button does 0, power does 1, agility does 2, and max HP does 3. Level is in option 1, level is option 0, power is option 1, agility option 2, max HP option 3. And I want to hook up the index to be that input that we just fed. So now that's how we reuse this function across all 4 of our pieces of information there. And now I hook that up. I know there's one thing that I want to do right before this, and that is I want to grab my scroll box, and I just want to clear the children of our scroll box. Because as I said before, to reorder the data, we first need to remove the data from our scroll box. So that's just one small thing that I want to add. So what we're doing is we're clearing our scroll box, we're grabbing all of our widgets of data, and we're getting which piece of information that we want to reorder, and we're adding it to an array. And now what we want to do is we are going to do a simple reordering code, or a simple like filtering code, I guess you could call it. So what we want to do is off of completed, I want to do a while loop. And what a while loop does is it will always loop until this condition is false. Well, we need to feed it a condition. The condition I want to feed it is if we grab our local variable that we made of that array to reorder, I want to just grab, is the length of this array, is it greater than 0? So we're basically saying, as long as this array has a piece of information inside of it, I want to keep looping. That's just basically what we're telling this array here, is that as long as it has a piece of information in it, I want to tell this while loop to keep going. So what do we want to do for each time we loop? Well, I want to grab out the max value from this array, because that's what we want to do. We're trying to reorder this data. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab the max value of this array, and we can do that. So now what we can do is each time we loop, what is the highest value inside of this integer array? Well, what it gives us is it gives us a max value, but not only does it give us a max value, it gives us an index, and that is very useful. So what we can actually do with that is we can grab which widget has the highest level, has the highest power, has the highest agility. Here's a small mental hurdle for you. The order that we are saving this data, pretend that we are reordering our level. We're going to have levels from 1 to 20. Based on the information from 1 to 20 inside of this array, at index 5 is going to match index 5 of this array of our widgets, if that makes sense. Because we're looping through our widgets in order and grabbing out their max values, or grabbing out the value that we're trying to reorder. Does it make sense there? That might be a little bit of a mental hurdle. So index 5 of our level here will be index 5 of the widget that we have over here. And that's very, very useful for us, because now what we want to do is we want to reorder our widgets here. So what I actually want to do is I want to duplicate, or actually I want to make a local array of these row widgets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new array. I'm going to call this reordered rows, we'll call it that. And I'm going to make it variable type of rows, of row widgets, sorry. So if you type row, we can get our row widget. That is going to be our object class. And now what we want to do is we want to get the max value of our current array that we actually have stored. So our array of rows that we stored previously when we created our widgets, we are now going to get out the index of our max value. And what we're going to do is inside of this reordered rows, we are simply going to add to it that widget that is the max value. But what we want to do also is we want to remove the index of that max value from our array of rows. So now we want to do remove index. We don't want to do remove item. We want to do remove index. And now with remove index, we want to hook up that same index. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to take our integer, our to reorder array, and we want to remove also remove index. We also want to remove the index of that same index there. So if this makes sense, let me actually promote this to a variable so this is a little bit cleaner. I'm going to take this index, I'm going to promote it to a local variable, and I'm just going to call it index. I'm just going to hook it up here, and I'm just going to take all of these pins and I'm going to hook it up to that index. It's just going to be slightly cleaner there. So what we're doing basically is in this while loop, we're saying, hey, this data of information that we want to reorder, as long as there is a piece of information inside of this array, we are going to loop. And each time we loop, we're going to get out the max value inside of that array. And with the index of that max value, we're going to store that index. And with that index, we are going to get out from our actual pieces of information which widget has that highest piece of information, that max value of information. We're going to add that to a reordered list that we just made, a reordered row variable that we just made. We're going to add it there, but then we're going to remove it from the other two pieces of information. And what that will eventually do is that we will remove all of the information from both our integers to reorder and our arrays of rows. And what we will be left with is a reordered array of our rows, of our row widgets. And that what we can do is on completed, we just want to take that array of rows and we just want to set it to be equal to now this reordered array. That might have been a little confusing, but I recommend you go back through this and just think it through a few times if you want to really get that down. And that is our reordering data. And that what we finally want to do at the end of all of this is that we want to loop through this information, is we want to do another for each loop. And for each of these information, what we want to do is we want to just add them back into our scroll box. So we take our scroll box and we do add child, and we are just going to add back in this ordered array of information. I think this should work. I think this should work just fine. That looks good to me. So let's try this out. So when we hit play, we should get completely randomized information. Let me just mute this real quick. We get completely randomized information. I lost my mouse there. We get randomized information, and let's see, if we hit our level button, does it reorder? Look at that. It reorders from greatest to least, and now we can take our power. What's our greatest power here? Is it 76? It looks to be 76, so if we hit power, there we are. It reordered. We can hit agility. It reorders. We can hit max HP, and that's how we can reorder our data inside of our rows. So guys, that's how you do it. We got a little complex there. I hope my explanation inside of our function here made sense. I tried to go slow and I tried to articulate what I was trying to say. I was trying, at least. This is our reordering code right here. This is literally the code that reorders, and what we did up here is we just set ourselves up to be able to reorder. I really recommend understanding this code. If you didn't understand this quite well, go through it again. This piece of code right in the middle here, this is our reordering code. This is just us going through whatever piece of data we want to reorder, and we're just grabbing the max value out of it, storing what that max value represented, and what that max value, what we wanted out of it, was a reference to an exact widget, and that we just removed it out of this information so that when we came through again and grabbed the max value a second time, it would be a lower value than that first value because we removed it, if that makes sense. That's how you do tables of data inside of widgets, at least. I hope that makes sense. I hope that's useful. You can use this for server browsers, inventory slots, and once again, we made it so that we can click on our row and that we could do things with it. We could remove it. If it was like an inventory and you wanted to equip it, you could do that. But yeah, that's how that stuff works, guys. If you have any recommendations of tutorials that you want to see, things that you don't know how to do and you want to see done, please let me know and I'd be happy to do it for you guys. I'll see you guys in the next video.